and then I'm going to invite John to start giving us a little bit of a sense of what we want to talk about today.
Well, first, let me apologize for not being able to get up there. I have a home in Chicago and then one outside of Spring Green, but people, my neighbors say I can't even get in. It's so icy up there, so I decided better not try it. Also, it's good that we have people here from Lafayette and Greene and Iowa counties. That's a wonderful collection, and a couple people from each. So I think it's going to be a productive gathering. We sort of organized this discussion to have three parts. First is we're focusing on what we call local associations. So the first item on the agenda is why are we focused there? The second part of the agenda is to say, what are associations, and are there many of them around? The third is, if we're focused on associations, how would we identify them? And there we've asked Vicki Stengel from the head librarian in Dodgeville to join us, because she's begun some pretty impressive work on that kind of identification. And then there is the question of if we knew what the associations were, what would we be asking them? And finally, next steps. So I think we ought to be able to go over those and handle them certainly within an hour or less. So beginning with the question of why are we focused on associations? I think there are several reasons for that. The first is that if you try to do something that's comprehensive in a region, such as the southwest of Wisconsin, how are you going to get maximum coverage? How are you going to reach the maximum number of people? And if you deal just with individuals, your breadth and depth isn't going to be very, very much. But associations, have from 10 to 100 members, so that if you want to get really maximum coverage, associations are probably the most effective way of reaching the greatest number of people if you can get them involved. The second reason for focusing on associations is that the literature on mental health indicates that the most significant preventive in terms of mental illness is whether or not you are well connected with other people. And of course, the way we have formalized connections locally is through our clubs, groups, and associations. So associations are a major factor in maintaining people's public health, or to put it the other way, isolation is one of the predictors of mental health problems. The third reason to focus on associations is that we don't think about it very much, but most associations think they're already doing something that has to do with health. Now, some time ago, a couple of years ago, a group of people in Spring Green they identified a lot of associations, and then they asked them what they were doing. And I don't know, can you show the first page, Bridget? Is your screen working?
Right one.
The chart?
Let me know if this is...
Yeah, there you go. Can you all see that, I hope? At any rate, they asked the people in Spring Green, who were heads of local associations, whether they were involved in all kinds of different community activities. And you see them listed on the left-hand side. And they asked them, are you now involved in that kind of activity? And if they said no, then they said, would you be willing to be involved if you were asked? That's the second column. And if they said, I'm sure our members would be willing to be involved, that's what the second column is. The third column is, I think I'd have to ask the members before I could commit to that. And the last column says, no, I wouldn't be involved. But if you look down the list of issues, and if you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the seventh category from the bottom, they asked the people in 60 associations in Spring Green, are you involved now in any kind of activity focused on health or that improves health, physical and mental? And look there, 28 of 60 associations say we're doing something in that area. What's impressive about that is not one of these associations says in its name what we're involved in is physical and mental health. They're all saying that they're involved in something, but not that. So here we are in Spring Green with at least half of the associations saying that they're doing something in relationship to health, physical or mental. And 7 saying we're not doing anything, but if anybody asks us, we would. And 4 saying, well, I'm not absolutely sure we would, so I want to go back and ask our members. And then at the end, 20 say, no, I don't think we'd be interested in that. But one of the main reasons to be focused on association, beyond the fact that you really get a lot more coverage for your programs and activities, is that people, no matter what the association says it's about, in a town like Spring Green, half say that's a field where we think we are doing something. And if you could show the next one, next page, Bridget.
Yep.
There you can see that they were asked, say, are you working on projects that serve to improve the physical and mental health of the community? 28 say yes. Look how many members they have, 2,442. And I should say Spring Green has a population of 1,600 and about 3,000 more people in the school district. So we're talking maybe 4,000 to 5,000 people. But this many people are in associations that say they're doing something in relationship to health. And then if you look, and they're asked, if you, could you describe what your activity is? And the greatest number, of course, say we provide healthful activities as part of the association's function. And you can see the other things that they say they're doing in relationship to health or mental health. So what we know is that in a small town like Spring Green, there are 30 associations that say we're in this field already. We have an interest, and our name says that we're concerned about knitting, or we're concerned about we're a band, or we're the American Legion. None of them say they're about health. But when you ask them if they're about health, they say they are. So that's the other reason to really be focused on them, is because they're already in a mindset where they think health is a part of what they're about. So the point here is, if you want to get maximum coverage, if you want to have groups that are doing something already about health and groups that are themselves health producing, associations would be where you're looking. Now, the second question on the agenda is if they can do all those things for us, are there many of them around? And here we know that in Spring Green and the surrounding area, a population of about 5,000 people, that a group of citizens, 4 citizens in that community, found, believe it or not, 82 associations. And they did extensive interviews with 60 of them. And that's how this information was derived. Can you show us the next page? There we go. And show us the bottom part. Can you get any more in there? It's the bottom I'm interested. Yeah. So here you can see what they found in the way of associations. Why don't you leave it there for a minute and look at the variety of kinds of groups that are in one town, a town like Spring Green. 82. So if you had 60 of them involved in any initiative, you'd have a tremendous resource and you'd have involvement and participation beyond almost anything that people can do. So we know from work all over the United States that you don't have many places where you have a list like this of what the associations are, but they're there. And they do more work in terms of community well-being than anybody else in town, as individuals or even institutions. In Spring Green, if you look at the study that this is drawn from, you can see how much of the whole well-being of the town is created by their associations. So we know that they are very prevalent, but the big problem is you hardly ever can find a list like this anyplace. They're not really identified in most places. They're the invisible infrastructure, we say, of community life. They produce more participation, more healthful connections, and more production of community goods than any place else. So what we're talking about here is making them visible and then seeing if they want to become a part of a prevention promotion activity for mental health. Let me stop there. That's the background, and then we want to move on to Vicki. But does anybody have any comment, questions about what we're talking about here and why we're talking about it? All right, so eminently clear. So a little while ago, we talked with Vicki Stangl at the library in Dodgeville, and she began to mobilize some local people to try to identify the associations in Iowa County. And we thought it'd be very useful for those in the other counties to hear how they proceeded and what they found. So Vicki, let me pass the mantle over to you.
Okay, thanks, John. So I could listen to John all day. So yes, he's an inspirational man. I'm looking at this starting out pretty low tech because I would like as many people involved in this gathering process as possible. So what we did to start out is we identified basically the information we needed for a directory listing for an association. So we're looking at name, websites, contact information, you know, real basic, just contact. So if you were looking through a directory association, you're going to see this basic information. That's what we would like to fill out initially. I have volunteers who come in, and one of the first things they're doing is going through newspapers, about 2 months worth of local newspapers. In Iowa County, we have the Dodgeville Chronicle, the Pecatonica Leader, the Democrat Tribune, Voice of the River Valley. We've got some overlapping ones that people have brought up and are bringing in that meet different corners of our county. They're going through about 2 months worth, and they're jotting down on a form that has this contact information. They're jotting down that organization. If all they get out of that newspaper article is the name, fine. That goes into an alphabetical binder. And they're doing that on a regular basis. Then the next group that's working on that same binder is we have teens that work at the library. They're going through and looking up for more information on these organizations on Facebook and internet, and they're also looking in other kinds of directories we have at the library, anything that might list additional organizations. And they're adding more information to that same initial entry. So now we have, now we're just collecting more information and more organizations. The other thing we did was we put some notices and ads in local papers, on Facebook, on our internet page. Facebook, people shared it quite a bit, asking people to, if you belong to a local organization, send in the name and a contact person. So I've been getting people drop them off at the library, they email me. Then the other way we're doing is like this morning, actually, I just at 1 o'clock finished speaking at the Kiwanis in Dodgeville about this project. So one of the things I do is hand out the sheet that says, what organizations do you belong to, and list a contact person. This morning, I collected 42 names of organizations. So I have spoke to Kiwanis, Lions, Women's Club, Key Club, Boy Scouts, and just getting that word out that this is the kind of information we're looking at, and you don't have to supply it all at once, because that puts people off. Well, what if I don't know the right contact person? Fine, put down yourself, and we'll call you. So my goal is to get as much as we can get at this level. Now we could stop at this level, and you would have a directory of associations for your community or your county. Our library board has committed that the library will help to keep this updated. Now, right now, it's a local database and paper, but of course we would like it online, so eventually, it would be easier to input information, but my initial concern is getting the information.
How many associations have you identified so far, do you think?
About, I would say, at least 125 organizations we have initially some information on. Some we have lots of information on. Others we have a name and a contact person. I
And
asked them at the Kiwanis this morning about how many organizations they thought were in Iowa County, and the guesses range from 40 to 500. So it'll be interesting to see how many we've got.
And in a sense, you're also raising the consciousness of people that Iowa County is a place rich in groups of people who come together to do all kinds of good things. And that's
Yeah.
making visible the associational map of the community. And it's amazing, 120 associations that you've identified already. What's the population of Iowa County? Do you know? Anybody know?
Tom?
Population,
Yeah,
anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Population is about 23,500.
Okay. So that sounds like you're saying maybe there's one association for every 20 people in the county. How do you like that? Or if you say there are 23,000 people and that they average 4 people in a family, that's, let's say, 6,000 households. And if you have 6,000 households and you have over 100 associations, you've got association one for every 60 families. So what I think you're discovering is what a unrecognized but powerful source there is here that can be identified and mobilized around something that they're already doing in part and something that you would like to have them do as well. The next step after the kind of thing Vicki is doing, that is the identification of these groups, is how are we going to mobilize them? We can get a directory, but how are we going to get them involved in promoting mental health? And that requires, I think, a commitment of a group of people to talk to as many of the leaders of the association as possible. Actually, it's best to do it one-on-one rather than try to get them into a group, and to begin to go deeper into what it is these groups are doing at the present time, and then testing out what they would be willing to do, particularly in the mental health area, if they were asked. And then you will have a very clear idea of what are the groups that the leadership feels would be willing to become involved in mental health promotion. And it seems to me, and there are at least 3, there may be 100, but there are at least 3 things that you could consider asking them questions about and see whether they'd be willing to do. And one is to educate their own members and their members' families. What would you want to communicate to people about how to maintain and promote mental health in your family and and among your associations? So that if you had 100 associations and the average membership was 25, and you got that kind of a response, you'd have 25. You'd have 2,500 possibilities. I'm not sure my mathematics are right on that, but if you ask them, what would you be willing to do to promote mental health, and you have yourself some ideas about that within your membership and their families, that's the first approach. The second approach is if we wanted to do something in our town or together in the county, would you be willing to participate in that kind of programming? So we're not only asking, would you be interested in participating with your membership, but supposing we had 50 associations that were ready to do everything that we know is good to do to promote mental health and to limit suicide and mental health problems. And the third thing you could do is to ask them, well, here, what we know is that of all the predictors of the problem of what we call mental health problems, the clearest predictor is isolation. So the third question is, if there are isolated people in your area, in your town, in your neighborhood, what would you be willing to do to begin to invite those people to become engaged in the community's life with associations, with your association, so that there are at least 3 possibilities once you know who they are and once you talk to them. And the one is, here are some things that you could do with your membership to promote mental health. Here are some things you could do with other associations in town or in this part of the county or in the county that would promote mental health. And third, here's something you can do to begin to break down isolation among people and to bring people together so that they have the strength and feel for community. Those are all the kinds of activities that they might be involved in, plus many more. Those are just the ones that occur to me and the ones that you're seeing there on the screen. So what we're saying here is there are a lot of associations. They are involved already in what they think of as activities focused on health. A lot of them are. There are others that are waiting to be asked and invited. They give us a kind of participation that we can't reach in any other way. Just being involved in them promotes mental health. And we can, after we identify them, mobilize them to become the chief actors with their own families, in their neighborhoods and towns, and in terms of building community by inviting people to participate. So that's, we're trying to keep this brief. That's the summary I can give at this time. Does anybody want to add anything, or do you have any questions at this point?
Yeah, this is Tom. John, how are you?
Good.
I just wanted to check with Vicki about a question or something she raised earlier that would be helpful to know. Vicki, why do you want a lot of people involved in the beginning in your collection process?
I want tie-in. I want their buy-in. I think for this kind of project that the most important thing is the journey, is the whole gathering process. If we can get as many organizations and people involved in bringing this information to us, that the chances of us connecting these organizations and making strong connections within our communities is much greater. I think if we very efficiently and effectively use a few people to pull this all together and tie it up with a bow, we might not get the tie-in that we need coming down. I would like to see this project, you know, maybe this year in Iowa County, we can see 200 organizations listed in a directory format and 50 organizations interviewed, and having a mental health aspect. Maybe next year we can add a few more on each end of this and look at another aspect, maybe working with youth or homeless. But I think the connection is what's going to make us strong. We have some really good organizations in Iowa County. The connector is what connecting to agencies, connecting to each other, connecting to government entities. That's where I think we're weaker.
Thank you, Vicki.
I think that's a great insight. If you begin to build a network of people who have committed themselves to engage in this initiative, if they have begun to talk to, ask questions of the leaders of a lot of associations, that group of people could themselves be a major force in the future for dealing with homelessness or dealing with economic development questions that aren't otherwise involving a lot of people. But you're talking about setting up a vehicle, a set of relationships and infrastructure that once you get it in place and you get the relationships and many people involved in gathering the information and participating in this process, you have the vehicle to do almost anything that you want to do in the county that will make the county a better place to live. So you're creating the ground floor of a house that can be built in many ways. It's the foundation for all kinds of other activities in the future, but you're testing it out and using it in mental health area to begin with.
Thank you. This is Tom again. I had another question, and that was, given that there's like 9 or 10 people on the call, I'd be curious to hear what kind of feedback other people have for John or Vicki from what struck you about what you heard.
This is Chris, Marion. Can you guys hear me?
You bet, Chris.
Okay. I'm on the Southwest Regional Planning Commission, and recently there was an event around economic development visioning, and Maggie started off the presentation by showing 3 or 4 local newspapers that had recently been published, and there were disasters on every single one of them, either a fire or a bad accident or something falling down. And he made the point that we don't represent ourselves very well as communities to, say, prospective buyers, but also really to ourselves. And I think that a project like this can really build hope and pride in our assets, what we've already got. And I would love to find a way to share this with the public, not in a real explicit way, but just begin to infiltrate the front pages with news about really good news every week about what our community associations are doing.
Great idea.
Chris, let's make sure we don't lose that somewhere along the line, that we have a conversation, a deeper conversation about how we do that.
This is Carol. In your book, John, that we got the abundant community, you talked about the importance of these within associations, that these people within them are familiar with each other, that they establish trust with each other, and they begin to share more personal things. It seems like that would be an important, it's within each association, or many of them. I guess I'm wondering if over time then, as you build this network, if that sense of trust and being willing to share things regarding in the area of mental health, if that grows as a process of putting this network together?
Yeah. I think every association is a manifestation of people who trust each other. That's what holds them together. We trust each other. And to the degree that you connect more and more people to associations and more associations to each other and isolated people to the associations, you're building a trust network that is the core for getting anything done. If you have to pay people to do things, then you won't get nearly as much done as if you get people trusting each other because they do it because of their connection to each other, to their friendship, to their commitments. And it's that part of our life that this is activating. That part that we act not because somebody pays us, but because we care and trust each other.
Okay, thanks. But that would grow then, say one association begins working with another on something, and then that trust that's within each of the individuals' organizations begins to spread as they share more experiences then?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Carol, that's a really good question. And, you know, Robert Putnam talks about bonding and bridging capital, right? Two forms of social capital. And bonding capital is the relationships of trust within an association, and bridging is the relationships that happen as a result of associations working together across, you know, different associations. So what you're pointing to is the whole thing of going deeper and going broader with your relational work.
Okay.
Okay, that helps.
Right.
This is Haley Jordan. It just struck me as everyone was talking that we continually talk about, excuse me, resource guides, and everybody has a different way to put out a resource guide, and right, and everybody has, you know, low reading level or second language and on and on and on. But none of those guides, most of the times, and I'm guilty of it, we did it last year for farmers, we don't include local associations. It's this state office or this county office, but it's all triangle and not a whole lot of circle. So that was just something that occurred to me as we talked about things.
Haley, this is Vicki. I think that's a really good point. I've been getting, even today when I spoke, I got one of the comments that came back was, have you looked at this resource guide? I've been getting emails saying, hey, this is a good idea, but we've already done it. Well, I look at their resource guide and it is agencies. It's, you know,
Right.
It's not associations. But one of the other coalitions in Iowa County, we're looking at putting a resource guide together. So I'm collecting all the ones people are telling me about. So maybe I'll get a good one at the end.
Well, and when we talk about, you know, oftentimes you sit in a meeting as an extension person and we talk about why people don't use resources. But then if we go and think about the trust that's involved in associations versus walking up to a government person and asking for assistance, that puts a whole different spin on why people may or may not use a resource.
Good point.
Vicki, this is Tom again. These are really good questions you guys are raising. But I got a question about, you know, you're a county library. Do you think the credibility of the kind of the place that serves as the foundational asker, collector is important?
Well, I do, Tom.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm just trying to ask the questions to set you up here for success, Vicki.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I wanted to work with Tom and John on this project, and so whatever they would have said, I would have raised my hand for. But I've been dying to work on this particular project for a long time from a library point of view. I think it's a perfect match for libraries. And I met with the Southwest Libraries on Friday and talked to the other Iowa County libraries, and they're, you know, they thought it was a great idea too. So we hope to expand it that way also.
Thank you.
Yeah, libraries seem to be natural. Do people have any, if you thought of what might be a credible central actor in this whole thing, does anybody have any other ideas in the other counties? May not, library may be, you know, the most common and most reasonable, but are there other key sponsoring points that you can see? Or is it?
Chambers of Commerce.
Huh, interesting.
Paul I find that I think if you had a connector in a community, because what I'm finding when we're trying to do this organizational lifting and you go to different meetings, nobody is really aware of what the other organizations are. And I'm all of a sudden realizing that we have a farmer's market and we have a historical, and they're both on the same block, but they do not communicate with one another. And yet it's just simple things. A library is a government, I'll say a government thing that is set up in the community. So yes, if a community has a library, that is a natural thing to do. But if you don't have a community thing like the Village of Ridgeway, you really have no central person for anybody to go to if the clerk does not want to monkey around with it. So a connector in a community is priceless. That's all.
I wanted to share an insight, and I was on when I tried to say this earlier, but when we talked about the difference between organizations and associations, it dawned on me that organizations are places where people go to get help, typically organizations, institutions, and associations are a place where people go to offer what they have, to offer what they, and it's a really empowering world to be in. So I was just kind of dawned on me that that might be a real significant differentiation thing in terms of especially mental health.
Good.
Yeah, associations are in a way the magnifier, the amplifier of a group of people, each of whom has a gift. And they come together because they care about each other the same thing, and they have trust. And that combination allows you to do things that a government or businesses can't do nearly as well. So when we do this kind of work, we're putting together a set of commitments and relationships that will get things done that can't be done by organizations where people are paid to do what they're doing. Paid organizations are fine for what they're doing, but we're talking about people in association. Association is not a group of paid people. It's a group of unpaid people, although they might have one or two paid people. They might have a secretary, or they might have even a pastor. So we're really mobilizing a force that usually isn't connected, and it's the most powerful potential source we have to get anything that we want done. But mental health is especially applicable. So that's why when we're thinking about how are we going to identify associations, I think a way of saying, well, what do I mean by association? It's a group of people who come together to do something, and they're not paid, although they may have a paid member or two. So they're not an agency, and they're not a government, and they're not a business. They're the other part, which the word civil has to do with. It's civil society. It's the stuff we do because we care, not because we're paid.
So what would our next steps be, John? What would we, like, what are Vicki and Tom and Paul, or Bruce and Barry doing in Iowa County?
Well, let me ask if I understand. There are people joining us today from 3 counties: Lafayette, Greene, and Iowa in the main. Is that correct?
Correct.
And in Iowa County, they've got something going now on the identification, and then next step would be the beginning of gathering information and making new connections. But I wonder if we had a next meeting, and I'd hope I could be there face to face, that Tom could be there as well, that we allow people in Lafayette and Greene County to think this whole thing over and decide if they want to join in this kind of an effort in their counties, and have some way where they're gathering a group of people who want to do some sponsorship work. Would it be reasonable to say, if we meet in a month, we would meet with the people from the counties who have heard about, learned about, thought about this, and say, yeah, I think we're ready to begin just as they have in Iowa County. Would that be reasonable for the people, at least in Greene County and Lafayette County?
I think it works for Greene County. We're going to actually have our mental health team meeting on this Thursday, so this is something I can bring up and we can discuss, so more people are kind of on board with it.
Same thing for Lafayette. I can bring it up to Candy and Jason for the meeting on Thursday.
So this is Tom Slaney from Iowa County. In our next steps, I think what we did is Vicki is taking the bull by the horns and identifying those groups. We need to continue to work on that. But now we're turning, and after we get that basic demographic information, we're customizing our questions that we're going to do in an interview to the associations, and our plan is to do at least 50 of those annually, more if possible. But I think some of our midterm goals are to have, this resource guide be electronically, and ultimately we want to create a culture where our volunteer associations are aware of one another. I think that's one of the things we pointed out today. They're not aware of who's even around and what they're doing, and that they're working with one another or together. And so that's really our big picture of our group, and that's kind of the goals that we established last week from this group. So that's kind of our next step.
Well, Bridget, you're the facilitator, and at least as I hear it, if we got together next in about a month, both Lafayette and Greene County folks who joined us will have made some decision, and will be, if they decide to go ahead, we'll bring a couple of key people with them to the next meeting to share both what you've been doing, and then to begin to think about some of the questions that we now have to address, because we're moving toward action.
Yeah, so that is the question. So we met on basically a fourth Monday, 1:30 we were going to meet until 3:30, but because we're doing this by a distance, we're making this a little briefer, but wondering if either the 25th or the 26th of March are open in people's calendars. And it would be lovely to get this done in this meeting. There are a lot of doodle polls that I send out, and it's nice to not have to do that on the internet. If there's any way to check people's calendars and just kind of say a yay or a nay, there's only a few of us on the line.
And you're thinking about the same time, 1:30 to 3:30?
We'll start there, yeah. I think 1:30 to 3:30, see if that works. And John, I think I wanted to just see if people could do the Tuesday, the 26th of March,
Let's just
because
keep it open. Either
traveling.
day.
Yeah.
This is Vicki. I unfortunately won't. I'm out of the country that week, but I can give. Tom can fill you in on what we're doing on our part. I'm going to Egypt. I'll collect some more associations for you. And
You may find
ride.
some. You might find some there we don't want, Vicki.
Yeah. Oh, surely.
But I wonder, Vicki, whether or not there may be somebody from your team that might be able to be there as well. Besides,
Okay.
Just think about
look.
that.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
This is Haley from Lafayette, and I think this is a really important process. I just did just a small, tiny bit of this for my plan of work for this year. I was looking for associations in the county, and to be honest, I came up very empty at the associations I was looking at. But when we were talking about trust earlier, I would really need to get someone from within the county on board. I live in Greene County. I grew up in Greene County, so I'm the outsider here. So that's going to be the challenge before next month, is to get someone currently in the group to see the importance of it and get involved.
I think that's a very good point, Haley. One thing I think that people who are in agencies could do, especially if their community is not their home community, is look at the associations that you touch base with, and at least get those connections.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And we do keep a record of that for extension into our federal funding, so that I can easily do myself.
But if you do that, and the ADRC does that, and the mental health, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even from an agency point of view, we're gathering the ones that we touch to make sure they're in there also. But you do need local people. Yeah.
Haley, this is Chris. I think Candy, I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I think it would be really interesting to have a discussion about Darlington being a library hub. Because I do think that libraries are evolving, right? And we're seeing them as more third spaces for this kind of creative community work. And I would love to have a conversation with you and Candy about that. But to me, that's like a perfect fit. And I would be happy to help her with the mapping. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's not that Candy will be negative. I just know Candy has a lot on her plate. So
Right.
before I put her out there.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking if we begin a conversation about the library as kind of being that physical space, because I do think a lot of this work is almost like a pencil and paper thing because of the very long institutional history of a lot of these associations. There's a lot of older people who aren't necessarily going to enter into this on the internet.
We're losing you, Chris.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, I'll talk more to you on offline.
Sounds good.
Glad you could join us though, Chris. I'm glad. Yeah. But I think we've pretty much lost you now, Chris. It's hard to make out what you're saying about it at all. But, okay. So I'm going to ask a very direct question. Tuesday, March 26th. I know Vicki cannot make it is it okay to do 1:30 to 3:30 in Dodgeville on March 26th? Otherwise, I will send out a doodle poll.
This
I
is,
think that for me, it's fine.
yeah,
Okay.
Bridget, this is Carol. That day is good for me. Better than Monday afternoon would be okay, but Tuesday the 26th is great.
Okay.
This is Jill. That works for me too.
What was that?
Jill?
Jill, thank you.
It works for Haley.
It works for Mr. Moskower.
And God willing and the weather.
Yeah, don't go there. Don't go there, John.
Okay.
This was a good call. Really well done, you guys.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, for all your participation, for your good questions. Tom M., everybody's participation. So thank you, and I'll send out all the information about the gathering later in March.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks, John.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Vicki.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
How do we get out of here now?